So good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are we doing, ladies? Everybody good today?
Very good.
Happy day.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we're going to tackle a subject today that actually we had the craziest thing happen with a couple of patients this week. And I think that people need to understand what to pay and what to say when they go in for testing, labs, any type of MRI, CT, and so on. And I know, Karen, you have a ton of expertise in this area, so we're going to hear a lot from you. But the one thing that has come up over and over, and I've actually had this happen to me myself, so I know that this is really happening in labs all over the country. I had a patient go in for a thyroid test this morning. And this patient has been on thyroid medication that has been approved and paid for by the insurance company for the last 10 years. She was diagnosed over 10 years ago. She takes a simple, I think it's Synthroid or one of them every single day. And she's been doing very well, but she had to have routine testing done, right? You have to test the thyroid. I don't know how often. You're a nurse, Karen, so you might know. How often do they have to test for the thyroid? Do you know?
My doctor only does it every 2 years, so.
Okay, so maybe that's the norm.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Right, so she gets sent to Quest this morning here in California. And the gal that checks her in doesn't say a word, right? Like the doctor's office, the person that checks you in, if they want a copay, they usually ask for it. That didn't happen there. So they take her back into the lab area and they say, your bill's gonna be $283. And Beck says, okay, well, I have insurance. And they say, well, we collect that up front. Now, she's in a place with a bunch of cubicles and people are in them getting their labs drawn. So this isn't just happening to her. This is probably another 8 people in that bullpen. Beck says, you can't collect that money up front. You guys have to go through the process of billing my insurance company first. No, what we do is we hold your credit card. She goes, what you're doing is not legal. And the reason she knew to tell them that is because she asked me before she ever got there. And she said, what you're doing is not legal. The minute she told that phlebotomist that it was illegal for what they were trying to do, the backpedal starts. Oh, well, no, what we do is we keep it on file for when it gets done at the end. So, and this happened to be my wife, okay? So the fact that I'm saying her first name, nobody's going to care. So she says to her, she said, this is not legal. And I know you're not allowed to do this. And I will pay it when it comes in. And the woman immediately stepped off. And people were within earshot. I said to her, I said, why didn't you tell it to everybody else sitting in those bullpens getting their bloods drawn? She's like, because I don't want to pick a fight like you do. Oh, okay, whatever. But this is not unusual. I've had this happen to me. They wanted something like $3,000 on, because I had a massive panel that had to be done, like 9 tubes of blood or something ridiculous. And they wanted like $3,000. And I told them, you guys are violating ACA law. So Karen, what do people do when something like that happens? What do they say? I mean, I'm always ready to pick a fight, but most people you've noted before, they freeze in front of those people. So what would you recommend?
Well, they've got to have their argument together up front, because, that's the kind of thing that you have to be able to answer, just like she said. For example, say this is against the ACA and here's where the rule is, and maybe cite a number, just to make a point.
Right.
But we all know people don't do that. But maybe if people start to carry something like that on the back of their card that says you do not have to pay up front due to ACA, and I don't even know where it is exactly, but it's there. But
yeah, no, I know it's there. I mean, I'm sure we could pull it out. I've read it.
Right. But it would be back up to the argument. Otherwise, it's you against the person sitting at the desk.
Right. And, Amy makes a really good point. People are going to be afraid that they're going to get told to go ahead and leave. And I have to tell you, that happened to me. That happened to me at a LabCorp facility. They wanted, I don't know, $300-400. And I said, no, I'll pay it when the bill comes in. She goes, then we can't take your blood. I'm sorry. And I looked right at her and I said, now, before I call your corporate office in Syracuse, New York, are you sure about that answer? And she goes, absolutely. It's our corporate policy. We have to collect this money. Well, I was having surgery the next day, so I had no choice. So I paid the money. And the minute I left that facility, I called Syracuse and I talked to somebody in charge. And I'm here to tell you, they rattled their cage here in Corona, California. And the next time I went in there, it did not happen again. And I told the gal at the administrative office, you know, this isn't right. Your people should not be allowed to frighten people into paying, especially when they know that those labs are what's holding up a major surgery within 24 hours. And of course, you know, the company line is, oh, well, we don't do that. We don't encourage that. This is basically a rogue office. Well, and again, Karen, you talk to patients all the time. It doesn't seem like it's a rogue practice to me.
Well, and here's the other thing. Everybody starts their insurance in a different month.
Right?
Everybody has a different deductible. Everybody
Right.
has a different copay. So how do you know what month, what copay, and what deductible they are at the time they're in your office?
You don't. You have no way of knowing that.
No way of knowing whatsoever. So
Because deductibles are not calendar year, right? They're annual.
it depends on your plan.
Right.
So if it's annual, you know, but if you have a plan that goes from June to June, that's your annual,
Right.
you know, so,
That's a good point.
you know, that's the issue. You have no idea where these people are in this whole thing. So it's not even, for example, I told you I had the same issue and it was for a surgical procedure, a minor one, but we were leaving in a few days to go to California. To not pay it would have set up a problem to go to California on a plane that we had tickets for. So the argument was going back and forth. So I wrote a post-dated check. And everybody says, well, that doesn't always work. I said, well, it does if you argue with your bank. You know, that's the kind of thing you have to do. You have to do. And I don't know that that will always work. Okay. But I did the check. And just so you know, I wrote 2 checks. I got one back and they took $100 out of the other one and had to send me another check for the rest.
Interesting.
That, and
Yeah,
that,
you know, I think it's like you said, they had you and this associate of yours, they had you in over a barrel.
yep. You know, it's 6 o'clock it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Who am I going to call?
Right.
There's not
Right.
even anybody to call when you're having a procedure,
Right. Yeah, that's true.
you know? So, and it, you know, that stuns me that this is outpatient. So when you got to the outpatient surgical unit, that's what they asked for. You didn't know that was coming.
Right. Well, you know, and what they've started doing out here, and I know that this is going to raise some hell, so everybody get ready. St. Jude is one of the worst offenders. They all do it. St. Jude, St. Joseph, Tenant Health, Memorial Health, they all do it. And if you are going for a procedure, whether it's at an outpatient facility or whether it's in the hospital, they're telling people don't bring anything but your money and your ID the day of the procedure. Well, you know, my biggest argument to that was, what happens if I die? Then what? I'm not paying the check if y'all kill me, right?
Yeah.
And this actually happened to me, and this happened to me more than once. But one time I got the phone call. My procedure was at the beginning of January. Okay. And I think I've mentioned this before. I don't think it's recorded in any of the files here, but here we go. I'm going to go after St. Jude. So first of all, I love St. Jude. Okay. Love the hospital. It's very clean. Everybody's very nice. Great facility, beautiful, marble everywhere, water fountains. I mean, it's fucking lovely, right? Love it. But there's a reason for that, because y'all have a lot of money. And for a nonprofit, they sure do have a lot of money. I had a procedure scheduled for January 5th. It was medically necessary. It was not cosmetic. If it was cosmetic, we wouldn't be talking about it. But it was medically necessary. And I was lining up in the middle of the pandemic for my COVID test 48 hours before. And I get a phone call from St. Jude, from the billing department. And this boy says to me, hey, just want to let you know your surgery is $12,500. I said, oh, okay, great. And he said, so your specific insurance plan requires a $2,500 deductible and 20%. up front. And I said, really? He said, yes. And I said, well, how do you know I haven't met my deductible? Oh, well, we just checked. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know in any universe, and Karen, you know billing inside and out. Can any individual provider check and see what your deductible remaining is at any time of the year?
Absolutely not.
Right. So that was the first big lie, right? There's multiple big lies in life, ladies. We all know what they are, right? One is that check is good. I'm not going through the other three. This is a family show. But you're right. They can't check that. So I said to him, I said, well, how did you check? And he goes, oh, well, we have a direct access to the database with the insurance company. I said, well, I just filled insulin yesterday and it was $700. I go, so how do you know? And he starts to stutter. I said, but let me ask you a more important question. And his name was Tyler. I said, we'll come back to this. I said, what happens if I have a massive coronary on the table tomorrow? I said, how much is a heart attack? He goes, what? I said, how much does it cost me to have a heart attack on your table? He goes, I don't understand. I go, well, it's very simple. I said, if I have a heart attack, they're not just going to let me be, right? And he goes, well, of course not. I go, you guys are going to get a crash cart. You guys are going to do heroic measures and all of that, right? And he goes, well, exactly. I said, well, how much is all of that? And he was silent. I said, let me tell you something, Tyler. I said, you called the wrong person today. I said, because I know ACA law, I understand billing, and in fact, I own a third-party administration company. I said, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. I said, and you just violated ACA rule. I said, and I am sure that those over at St. Jude would not appreciate that. So of course I get the big back pedal. I'm going to have somebody call you back. Well, sure as shit, I got a phone call and it was his manager. And Crystal was delightful. And Crystal said, you know what? He never should have said that, Mrs. Wood. We're so sorry. None of that's true. And I said, I know, Crystal. I said, but how many people going to that center tomorrow did y'all say this to accidentally? I said, you guys told me to come in with over $4,800 either in cash or in a check or a credit card. I said, you're not entitled to the $4,800, Crystal. I said, that 12.5 does not get approved through Blue Cross. I said, that 12.5 gets carved out.
Absolutely does.
Right. And I said, and your $12,500 is going to come down to about $3,800. And she goes, yeah, you're absolutely right, Mrs. Wood. There will be nothing due tomorrow. Just go in and have your procedure. So I went and had my procedure. I ended up getting bills after it was all done, after Blue Cross, it was Blue Cross or Blue Shield, whichever one it was. After they did their part, I was left with a net sum of just over $250. Now, this guy said my deductible was $2,500, which my deductible is $2,500, but I'd already met some of my deductible. But this was medically necessary and didn't come out of that deductible. So, you know, for these people to be able to do these things, and it wasn't just for the surgery, they pulled the same shit when I had the MRI done. Your MRI is $3,000, Mrs. Wood. This was in November before the surgery. Your MRI is $3,000. You need to bring that in. You haven't met your deductible this year. And I said to them, no problem. And I got there, and sure enough, I'm in a St. Jude hospital. I am at a main desk in radiology. And the lady says to me, do you have your payment? And I said, payment for what? She goes, they told you to bring a payment. I said, they told me to bring a payment for a service I haven't had rendered yet. We don't know what your carve out is yet. And you don't know how much of my deductible I've paid or haven't. That was the end of the conversation. Oh, yeah, yes. Sorry, Mrs. Wood. No, you're absolutely right. Have a seat. We'll be with you in a minute.
Well, and deductibles vary from insurance plan to insurance plan. One surgery may not hit a deductible, another surgery might. An MRI might not be in the deductible, another MRI in a different plan might. So it's even by types of service that these issues can arise. And I don't think people understand that's another issue. But who reads their insurance plan? Nobody.
Nobody. And before we did this for a living, we didn't read it either. I admit it readily, never read it. Now, let me tell you something. I have read it back to front. They don't guarantee to pay anything.
Correct,
Nothing.
correct.
They don't guarantee that you can even get served anywhere. They have indemnified themselves to death.
Oh, yeah, throughout the whole
When it-
thing.
Right. When it comes to things like labs and testing, everything is so subjective. It all depends on what CPT and ICD-10 codes they use and any extender codes thereafter. And most people don't know that there's extender codes. Most people don't know that there's all these different nuances for one test. An MRI is an MRI is an MRI. Okay, you go in the same fucking tube, you use the same amount of resources. If you have contrast, that's one extender code. But contrast is contrast is contrast. They get 5 and 6 codes to squeeze out every single dime they can because they've been carved out by the insurance carriers.
Well, not only that, you can be in the middle, well, not that often, but you can be in the middle of a medical procedure, which is medically necessary, which they already did their thing, you know, for making sure that there's a, I don't know if everybody still does this, but sometimes the hospital calls ahead to see if this is an allowable procedure.
Right, right.
Okay,
They want to
so-
make sure they're going to get their $27,000 for an overnight stay in a surgery.
And
Right.
then they tell the hospital, yes, you go ahead and do it, it's medically necessary.
Right,
So then while you're in there, something happens and it's not medically necessary by the insurance company's standards when the billing comes through.
right. Because it wasn't part of that first sum.
Correct.
Right,
So now you've got that to argue with.
right,
And oh, by the way, the doctor wasn't in network that saw you when you came in through the ER, so we're not going to pay that either. That's where you have to start arguing all these programs through, because I'm sorry, that's your ER doctor, your hospital, not my
Right.
problem.
right. But when you look at pair services, right? Pair services are pathology, anesthesiology, radiology, and emergency room or ED. Those things are never in network. They make sure, these hospitals make sure they do nothing but have transient doctors. And they do that so that they can bill everything out of network because in-network has already been negotiated by your insurance company. The insurance company has said, we're going to pay X dollars for anesthesiology. But if it's out of network, everything over and above comes back to the consumer. It's really absurd to me that people don't ask more questions. When we go buy a car, when any of us go to purchase an item at Macy's, anyone that goes and consumes products of any kind at a grocery store, if something is not right, we will ask that person taking our money. Why will we not ask these hospitals, these labs, these testing facilities? Why will we not ask, Karen?
Well, let's go back to the surgery. So you're having that surgery that was approved. Anesthesia is not covered in the next bill that you get because they weren't in network.
Right,
How would you know that? How would you even think to ask that? It just got approved for the surgery. Without anesthesia, you weren't having the surgery. So how do you know that? So these are all the things that they throw at you that you think you have to pay for and you don't. All you've got to do is start arguing the point. And I tell, and I'm gonna get in trouble again, but I tell everybody, don't pay anything for 6 months. Because
Right.
by the time they get done arguing with each other about what's paid and what's not paid and a few phone calls, it goes from you owe $5,000 to you owe $250.
right,
But if you would have paid that up front, you're acknowledging that that billing is correct. And now
Right.
they're going to make you pay the whole thing.
right. You are making a bilateral contract by adding the consideration. Money is called consideration. And that bilateral contract has been fulfilled by you providing that consideration. If you don't agree with the fact that they brought in somebody out of network, if you don't agree with that they sent whatever it is they took out of you to pathology for a certain type of test, and that's out of network. If you don't agree with that stuff, you're right. Don't pay the check.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Amy.
So talking about out-of-network services, is it feasible for someone to request a radiologist, an anesthesiologist within network before something like this happens in a non-emergency situation when you can plan for your service?
Well, the answer to that is probably yes, but nobody would think about it. But then you'd want to ask the question, why does St. Jude's Hospital have anesthesia that is not in the network?
Correct.
So that's the question. And then it goes to what Tracy said, are they bringing all these people in as vendors? In that case, you have to make sure that you would go to that anesthesiologist and say, I am only going to pay what the insurance company would allow in this billing. And then you'd have to go to the insurance company and say, this isn't a network, but this is what the hospital's doing to make sure that got paid. It's a cluster.
It
And
is.
it's really complicated. No wonder
Yeah.
people are frustrated. Sorry, Amy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and how would you
No,
know that?
I just think that, coming from like an everyday person on the street, when you go into a hospital or a doctor's office, you're acting off of assumption that these people are really acting in your best interest
Yes,
instead of really looking for a way to, pardon the phrase, nickel and dime you, when we know it's more than nickels and dimes out
Right.
of, everything in, medical bills equal, depression, bankruptcy, anxiety, like so much is wrapped into that, and for people's debts.
well, the other thing is, if you don't look at your hospital bill, again, you're remiss, because that nickel and diming you're talking about totally exists. And what happens is, if you find something, say you're in the hospital and they said you had an MRI and a CAT scan and you didn't. Happens all the
Correct.
time. Happens all the
Yeah.
time. How
Right.
would you know that if you didn't look at your whole hospital bill? You wouldn't. You'd just see a total and figure that was going to be covered.
Yeah.
So I tell everybody to take a look at their hospital bill. If you did not get a copy of a line item bill from your specific surgery and or procedure, go get one. I'm arguing a bill right now with a hospital where the lady had eye surgery. They charged her for anesthesia, no problem. But then the doctor had to do something else on this eye and they charged for a second anesthesia. We're not going to
Right,
pay.
when she was under the same time.
Yeah,
There was no
They put her
gap.
eye to sleep twice.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no gap there. But again, you're right. People don't know. And Amy brings a great point. People are intimidated to ask. Because in those moments that you're having surgery, that you have to have blood. A lot of people, do you know the size of the needle phobia in this fucking country? Outrageous. People feel really vulnerable in those moments. They feel that they are at the effect of. They don't have any personal power. They are not empowered to get up and walk out. People feel like that is their lot in that moment, and they have to sit there and take it. And that's the big, in my opinion, that's the big mistake many of us make when it comes to doctors. I mean, I was raised in Great Britain, right? We are the epitome of white coat syndrome people. When my mom and dad came to America and we had to see a doctor, if that doctor said, your kid's going to die, my parents, they bought it. There was no conversation. That's too bad. We're going to miss you. That's the end of that. But that was the power these people had. My eldest sister, she had a typical pregnancy, and she got towards the end of her pregnancy and she was almost 2 weeks late. And she was already toxic. She suffered from toxemia in that pregnancy. The baby was taken by C-section, all because the doctor said, no, the baby can be up to 2 weeks late, no rush. And the doctor that ended up delivering my nephew, who, by the way, is developmentally disabled, the doctor that delivered the baby said that this baby was viable at least 2 weeks before. And why had nobody induced my sister? And the answer was because we were too afraid to challenge that doctor and say, what the muffins?
Yeah.
What's going on here? And it's true, people won't do it. That's why people won't say to somebody, at a Quest or a LabCorp. No, I don't have to pay you. Now, are we suggesting people should duck paying their lab expenses? Absolutely not. But why would you pay something that has not been carved out? These people all have contracts. They all have written agreements with one another. Anthem has a written agreement. Kaiser has their own labs, but there's a written agreement. And that written agreement says a hemoglobin A1C is $39. A CBC panel is $49. And they're all in writing and predetermined before you ever get up that morning. Those numbers are hard numbers. So why would we take a bill from Quest or from LabCorp or any private lab that's twice as much to start with? Why would they not just say, listen, Anthem's only going to pay $39. So your test is $39 and you owe us 78 cents. Why not start from that real price instead of starting from some fabricated number that they're hoping to get 20, 30, 40% of?
That's an issue. And here's the issue that follows that same thought. Say you don't have insurance.
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah. So what happens is the hospital said this surgery costs $12,500. We know that they're only going to get $3,800. If you don't have insurance, which fee do you think you're going to get charged?
$12,500.
12,000. Yeah.
So what you got to do ahead of time in those instances and say, I don't have insurance. I will pay what Blue Cross pays here. I know the fee is much lower. Let me know what that is. And you keep going until you find somebody that will give you the same fee. I think there's something written into some states, not all, where the hospital can't do that to you. But I think in most states, they would get away with that. But you know, you'd have to ask that up front. So if you're worried and all you have is catastrophic insurance, and a lot of people do, you know, they're carrying insurance that has, you know, I don't know, 20,000 deductible or something insane.
Right.
You have to ask up front. I mean, if you have it at all. But a lot of young kids don't have this, you know, in the 20s, you know, once they get off their parents' insurance, if they were on insurance to begin with, they're not going to pay for it.
Well, let me tell you something. If you've got kids going to college and they can't prove they have covered health insurance, it is now part of their tuition that they have to have whatever plan is given to them by that facility.
That's
So
what
I have.
saying.
I have two kids. One is going to a UC and the other one is going to a private Christian CBU. And on their statements, there's almost $2,000 a year for each child to have access to minimum essential coverage plans. Now, minimum essential coverage doesn't cover a surgery. It covers, you know, if you fall and break your neck, hopefully they're going to save you, but it's probably not going to be pretty, right? I mean, you're going to get the bottom of the barrel. If you need to see a doctor for birth control, no, you're going to have to pony for that. You know, if you have to go get an STD test, you're paying for that too. So this $2,000 is really nothing more than a gratuitous fee of shit that these kids are not getting anything for, okay? So those of you that have college kids, keep them on your health insurance. That's what I did. But the price on that plan for the healthiest segment of society, 18 to 25, that's our healthiest segment. Yet they're going to pay almost $200 a month for a shit plan that they could buy directly from an insurance company for $50 to $60.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, these are the kind, you know, when people talk to me about universal health care and you bring up these examples, this is why it should happen. There shouldn't be bottom of the barrel insurance where you worry about getting coverage. There shouldn't be, you know, this guy paying less because he's got less deductible. Everybody should be on the same level playing field. Without universal health care, we're never going to have that. So
well, that's never going to happen when Congress owes $19 trillion to Medicare. They have borrowed $19 trillion.
Oh, yeah.
And borrowed is the key word. They fucking owe the money.
Yeah.
And they need to pay it back. But they don't want to pay it back. And that's why they keep targeting Medicare. But even Medicare, they negotiate rates. They negotiate with the hospitals, with the lab corps, with the MRI centers. They negotiate those rates up front.
And
Everything is the bar of Medicare. And
And that
that's
is-
where these numbers start.
that is true. And that is a good point because you can go online and go to CMS and put in a surgical procedure and you can find out what some of the payments are.
Right. What Medicare approves.
Right. So,
Because in order to be part of the ACA, they've got to be willing to take Medicare patients.
correct.
Right.
So you could find out what that fee is, so they can't charge you that 12,500. They have to charge you whatever the Medicare fee is.
Right.
So you
Because
do
those
have,
of us-
you
go
do
ahead.
have some places to look.
Right. But again, none of us are asking the question. We don't have the bitch at the front of the store checking out saying, do you want paper or plastic? And by the way, if you're in California, it's going to cost you $18 for one plastic bag, but I digress. So if you have that person to go to and ask the question, you're going to go and ask the question. No one's asking the question. Had I not said to Tyler, what happens if I die on your table? I'd have walked in there with a check for $4,800. Do you suppose I'd have gotten any of that money back after the carve out? No fucking way. What would they have done? They'd have had the bill, 12,500. They'd have taken the 4,800 off of that as payment from patients. And then that balance differential would have gone to Blue, and Blue would have paid the same amount, $3,300 and change.
That's it.
So the hospital got paid twice.
Correct.
That's what's wrong. And it's the same labs. It's the same for testing. It's all the same. So I want to, we're going to wrap up here, but I want to give people something, Karen. I want to give them an option. So somebody goes in for any test, any lab. What do they say when these people ask for money?
I would just say, like you were saying, you can't ask for payment up front because you don't know where I am on my plan. And I know that that's against the law. And again, I would say you don't know what is in my plan.
That's
So-
a very, very good, that's a very good little nuance to throw in there. You don't know where I am in my plan or what deductible I've met. You don't know any of those things.
And there's so many plans. How do they even know what plan you're in? They don't.
They don't.
Oh yeah, they have it on the card. Here's my plan. Here's a number and a group number, and that's what
Right.
they.
All they have is Blue Shield in the box, and then it says plan number and then group and member number.
Yep.
Nowhere
So-
does it say they're on PPO Silver 70, Silver 80. It doesn't say that anywhere. All
No.
they have is member number and the insurance company.
Yeah, so that would be my argument, and I would hold to that. If you can't, I mean, like I said, it depends if it's 6:00 a.m. surgery or you're in a room where you're just getting a blood test for the day. But when you go in, I would really fight that because you could really get hurt on paying more than you need to.
I totally agree. Amy had one question come in. What is balanced billing, Karen?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at this, but
Amy, do you have a case in which that was relevant, or do we have a patient?
Let me see if I can go back and look at it.
So Karen, I want us to post a couple of things on the YouTube page. We're going to post maybe some graphics of all people have to do is grab a screenshot, and then they can keep it in their phone. And if they go for labs or go for tests, they can literally read the card off and see if that stops some of this
yeah.
practice from continuing in all these different markets, because it's happening all over the country. It's not just California that are trying to, suck your eyes out of their sockets every time you go for a procedure.
Oh, no.
Did you find it?
Yeah, I think it has to do with what you were talking about right now with the hospital getting paid twice. It's
Okay.
talking about if a patient's copay is higher than allowable, and you owe them a refund. It says it's not allowed to keep anything over the excess contracted rate. It's normally
Interesting.
referred to as balanced billing. It's explicitly prohibited in the vast majority of physician and payer contracts.
Correct.
And where is that relevant? Does it say where that story?
Well, let's
Yeah,
start with Medicare. Medicare, that's a no-no. No, can't do that. So what that means is what she's talking about is say the hospital bill was 12,500. Hello.
Okay.
And then it was 3,800, really.
Right.
The balance billing would then be coming back to you and saying, I want $9,000.
Okay. So if I'm on Medicare, they're not allowed to do that because Medicare
Absolutely.
has that carve out. So why are they allowed to do it if I'm on private healthcare, or are they not?
They are not, but you've got to be able to.
But nobody knows.
And the other thing is, Amy, when you're talking about something like that, again, that goes back to what did they charge you?
Right.
And then again, let's go back to, I know I'm going to get in trouble again, but don't pay that bill for 6 months.
yeah,
What happens is that balance bill that you're talking about, they send it out to you and you start paying on it. You're pretty screwed unless you can get a lawyer and say, hey, they balance billed me, and you won't even really know that.
Right.
You
But you've made a contract the minute you make that payment. Consideration is the key to that contract.
Yeah, and I keep hearing that. I have trouble with that because to me, that's just being a thief. But,
Right. But that's basic contract law, Karen. All you have to have is a meeting of the minds, consideration, and then a bilateral agreement. If you meet that criteria and the insurance companies are meeting that criteria, the minute you sign anything that says you agree to their terms and conditions, you agree to the hospital's terms and conditions, you've signed all of your rights away.
well, maybe what we need to do is get a bill, find somebody that has a bill that shows balance billing and how that works. And then, I'll have to think about this. I help people with billing. If I get a bill, I think I might know where to even start getting this, where I get a bill where you see what happens for the first billing. You get 15 days after your procedure. And by waiting 6 months, what the bill was here and what it was in 6 months.
so I have another example. It says, I know that if a patient's copay is higher than the fee schedule, we can only charge that patient the lower amount, which is the fee schedule. It says, my doctor seems to think that we can charge the patient a higher copay of $50, knowing that the insurance company fee schedule is going to start at $45 per copay. My doctors are told that they are able to keep the difference of $5 because the patient has an agreement with the insurance company to pay $50. So,
That's a catch
There's
22.
something's not right there.
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So it seems like this person's talking about the office knowing the fee schedules of the insurance companies, saying, for instance, $40 for a copay for an appointment, and then the doctor sets the copay at $50.
and they can't do that.
Yeah,
Because what
They
happens,
have to go with what's contracted, right, Karen? Otherwise, because they get a PMPM per member per month. They get a PMPM for every single person in their bucket of insured, right? So
Not
if the
always.
doctors,
not
okay,
always.
well, out here in California, our doctors get a check every month for everybody that they've agreed to see.
Okay.
Now, let's say the doctor has a caseload of 20,000 patients for his practice. That's about standard, depending on the size of the practice. They get so many dollars per month, day one, for each of those patients. Some of it's $2.20, some of it's $3. But if you've got 20,000 patients that you haven't seen yet, that you haven't billed for yet, you've just agreed with Blue Cross or Blue Shield, listen, I'm going to take your 30,000 people, 20,000 people, we'll use 20 for the sake of this conversation. I'm going to take your 20,000 people in my community and I will agree to see them. I will put them in, I will take them as new patients, I will keep them as continuing patients. But you write me a check for 30 or $3 per, so that's 60 grand a month. That's the start. I, as a practice owner, get 60 grand a month. Does that mean I don't bill for when they come in? No, no, no. I've agreed, rather than charging them my cash rate of $275, I'm going to charge them the approved Medicare negotiated rate of $175. And Medicare or any insurance is going to come in and pay me really $125, and I'm going to eat the other $50. But I also get a copay from the patient. and that's $45. So I'm really only eating $5.
Well, and the issue with the plan, what the one she was giving the example of, it happens very seldom, but it does. It's a
Right.
follow-up visit for something where they only charge you $45, for example. And
Right,
the doctor has an automatic office copay of 50, which is probably perfectly fine
right,
for a regular visit, but not for this follow-up.
right. Follow-up should be, 15, $20.
Yeah, so that's where these start to fall in, where they, and they can't do that if you catch them.
Right. But the key is you got to catch them. So there's got to be somewhere for people to go. And we're going to build a place for people to go. So just know over the next couple of videos, you're going to see, we're going to have a website for people to go, for them to deposit their stories in a HIPAA compliant fashion, so that we can at least try to start to help some of you that have these challenges. We get a lot of emails, but we want to be able to give you guys a direct place to go so that we can start to do some serious advocacy work, because somebody has to. And until this big bullshit conversation about having universal health, not having universal health, until somebody pulls their head out of their ass and says, listen, we have 6 lobbyists in healthcare for every member of the House and Senate, 6 per, something's fucking wrong there. Somebody somewhere doesn't want us to have a national solution. Like most of the rest of the countries in the free world, they have solutions. We don't. It's time. So we're going to definitely do that. Thank you all for coming in. Thank you all for your questions. Keep them coming. Our email, everything is in the YouTube page. Make sure you hit subscribe. Let us know what you think of the videos. Thanks, ladies.